Yeah,
All
so I'll start again. So I saw this thing online where I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a bookstore and it's moving like 2 blocks down the road or something. And are you still there? Okay. And yeah, cool, got it. And like 200 people show up to help the bookstore move. And so they're handing like books down the street, you know, hand to hand. And that could go really well. And I could be standing in line next to people that I've never met, but we all love this bookstore and we end up chit-chatting and we get to know each other. Now, there's a couple possibilities for like problematic dynamics. One could be that somebody on one side of me is standing like a little too far away from me in order to stand next to their friend on the other side. And it's a little too far to comfortably reach and exchange the books. Like then we have a problem. We have a tension point. Or later I move to another part of the line because I took a break and then I'm jumping back in. And now the person handing me the books is kind of throwing me the books. And it's a lot of work for me to try to catch the books. Like I want them in my hand. I don't want them flying at my body, you know? And so we're working together on this project and we're getting to know each other and it's fun, but then there's these tension points. There are these things that aren't working so well. And how skillfully am I going to be at addressing those things? And how responsive can the other person be at addressing those things and working it out, you know? So just to say, like, or that's like getting to know each other and working out the dynamics through the working together, right? And having that be the practice ground, like the actual doing this can be a practice ground for learning and practicing the communication skills, the model, all those relational skills, and building a culture of how we do that. And there can also be times where there can be like a workshop setting. Like right now, we're going to artificially practice the skills. We're going to do a bunch of funny exercises, or we're going to do some role plays, or we're going to take the pressure off by pretending we're talking about flying donkeys instead of actually the fact that we're trying to build a cooperative together. And somebody said they were going to work on the website, but then they didn't have time and it fell through the cracks, and that was really annoying, you know? So similar to what I was saying a few weeks ago, there's different entry points to connection. Some people want to enter into connection socially, you know, like, hey, we're having a tea and we're getting to know each other. I'm going to ask you about whatever, who you are, what your life is, and we're going to get to know each other. Or we get to know each other because we're developing segmented email and we're cooperating on how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And so then as a group, you know, what do we owe each other, right? And how are we developing trust, and what level, you know, do we need?
Yeah. And
yeah, what level does that like mutual aid society, you know, require?
Right.
But without like, you know, becoming too, you know, more personal than, you know, than a person might want, you know, and like,
right.
how to
Right.
like, how to take, you know, sort of like take care of each, you know, each other on both sides of that. So,
Right.
you know, so it doesn't belong, so it doesn't get to a point where, you know, right, where it's just transactional, but doesn't get to a point where, you know, it's like I'm moving into, you know, like having to like do deep, you know, processing with people.
Right.
That's like a requirement.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think it should ever be a requirement. I mean, deep processing is vulnerability. I mean, you need a high level of consent for that.
Yeah.
You need to be resourced. You need to be willing. You need to like choose that. It can't, I mean, closeness should never be a requirement.
Right.
Can't be, right? That would defeat the purpose of personal sovereignty and choice,
Right. Yeah.
However, to be part of a network, do we have a certain threshold? Do we say, we really want people to be building these skills and be willing to do this kind of work, yeah.
Yeah.
And it comes up in any community, in any group, is like, what if the basic values or tenets or, principles of this culture, what if they're violated? What if there's somebody who intentionally or unintentionally, probably without any malice, but, really breaks the circle, really goes outside expectations? Then what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's all really like, it all feels very, yeah, very important and, and relevant and something that,
Mhm.
yeah, it seems like a really good exploration, and then
Yeah.
start to like define and refine that a little more.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the more of the value exchanges that are happening, like the direct person to person value exchanges, the more relationships develop.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, Newman and I did our accountability thing months ago. So Newman and I were chatting on the regular one-on-one. Like, we had these opportunities to collaborate, to interact. And so
Right.
that's the relationship, the whole web of relationship.
Yeah.
And so if that aspect, that part of the collective becomes more and more robust, then the network is strengthened relationally.
Yeah.
And those are transactions. That was a transaction. It was like, you do this for me and I do this for you. I mean, it happened to be a dialogue because we were talking about accountability, and we ended up being very relational about it.
Mhm.
But it could have been done very cut and dry too. But even doing it cut and dry, we would have still gotten to know each other more.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's these value exchanges, right? And like working together in different ways or on different projects or, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like the baseline way, that we're developing, trust and building relationships.
Yeah.
And why I think that's really I mean, I love that model because, right, if I'm doing value exchanges with, it's like, I love that model because it starts at low stakes.
Mhm.
Say you did this with Newman and you just like, whatever, rubbed each other the wrong way or didn't, or Newman didn't, show up, for half the meetings or, all that, like,
Mhm.
it's low stakes, right? Or you can talk about it, but, nothing, it's not like, oh, we're on a, $10,000 job together.
Right.
And in that, and in that, I then find out, whatever, this person is flaky. Or
Right.
what not. These are just Newman as an example. I am just for the record, I am not saying that
Yes,
Newman is
I
flaky or
understand.
any of that.
I understand. Totally.
um,
Totally.
I don't think he would have thought that. Yeah, but and then yeah, so I think that there is that way of developing relationships, and then and then there's this other sort of idea. There's like the bigger sort of picture. What is the container? We're kind of holding. Right, like what do we, in this way I like sort of naming it. It helps me to name it as like this mutual aid society. And so like, and that may change, right? Like we're so well, yeah, like a person is, whatever, needs help. What can we do for that person and what can't we,
Hmm.
what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
a great exploration though.
Yeah.
And I think we have like done a lot of it. I think in a sense we have talked a lot about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just appreciating that the willingness to be sort of honest with oneself and transparent with the group is really high value for having a network. And I've been experiencing that kind of since the beginning, where each of the members that I've been in meetings with, or that I've had exchanges with, whether it's a value exchange or whether it's a meeting where we're brainstorming or creating something, or digging into the values or all of that, that people have seemed to be quite transparent about and honest with themselves about what they're available for and what they're not.
Mm.
And I haven't seen a lot of people being like, oh yeah, I'll do that thing, and then not do the thing.
Yeah.
I haven't seen people say, oh yeah, I'm gonna write 5 emails and do this thing and do that thing, and then not do it. People are like, wow, I'm really like being in this meeting and these are great ideas and I'm going to keep thinking about it. And what I'm available for is to do XYZ, or, or I can do this, but not next month. Like there's like that piece is an amazing level of trust building. Actually, does that make
Yeah.
sense?
That
And
makes
you're
perfect sense.
transparent. Like you're transparent. You're like, I need more help with this, blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
then people step in when they can, and it shifts a little bit, and there's more shifting to do. There's more distribution of energy to be done. But that's been very cool
Yeah.
in my experience.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I think that's been like, yeah, kind of across the board, uh,
Mm,
which is great, right? That's a big, it's a big trust piece,
yeah.
because you know, members trust that like, I don't have to like, like promise things that I don't feel like I can do. I don't have to feel like I have to overwhelm myself, or overextend myself, right? So then there's that like level of trust, and then
Right.
other people, right? Like if it's, if I'm expecting somebody to do something and they don't, then that's right. That kind of decays some of that trust. But if they're, yeah, but if everybody's doing what they say they can do because they're like, oh, okay, like this is what I have to give. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that works really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it, right, again, in these, still lower sort of stakes way, I think that builds like that builds trust in, that can transfer to higher stakes. Um,
Mm,
how are people showing up? What are people saying they can and can't do? But also there's these things, if you're, that, right, like if you're working on something with someone and they, like, right, like they're working on something and they make a mistake, and then it's like, does that person then like try and cover it up, and try and like put it under
mm,
the rug, and just be like, or they, yeah, see something they did, a month ago, say, oh, actually probably this might have worked, so what's the level of trust for them to just be, or me, to just be like, oh, hey, like this thing happened. And so I just want to bring that in, that how do we work with it?
right. Right. Yeah. And that's about building, safer spaces. It's the safety to make a mistake, or to be vulnerable, or to try something as an experience and have it flop,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
safer, braver spaces,
Yeah.
where we can take some degree of risk
Yeah.
and trust that we're not going to be dumped on our heads by the rest of the group, or like
Yeah.
get tomatoes
Yeah.
thrown at us,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's just right. That's like I just think that's incredibly powerful because,
Mm,
um, yeah, because we all like, we all make mistakes, or we all, so like, it's like, hey, how that's received, is I think is a big, it can become an important indicator, of how like actually like what the results are of a project or a team.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I know,
Right.
and this idea of like failure, I don't want to get too into this, because I get in the weeds on it because I'm excited about it, or I don't know. There's this book called Anti-Fragile,
Hmm.
that I started to, I'm listening to it on the audiobook.
Hmm.
And but it's a like I don't know, I got the concept like, like 2 pages in, I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. And but one of the things it's talking about is like the like for like groups or systems, there's a for to be operating like optimally, like there's a level of like failure that has to happen.
Hmm.
There's like an example of like, in a community like restaurants, like for for like, how like big banks, right? They fail and they have to get bailed out, right? Like that doesn't really happen in like the restaurant business, because you have lots of restaurants popping up and a lot of them fail, right?
Hmm.
And go under. And so, but like restaurants never like, like it's never like, oh, there's no more restaurants to go to, in my town.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And it's so that makes it not only that kind of, again, like not only like robust or resilient, but like this, this phenomenon, right? That speaking to here is something like he's calling like anti-fragile.
Hmm.
So like the more volatility, like the sort of stronger it gets.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, so it's really interesting, to look at it in that lens, and then also he does speak to this, but with the way that like if there's a, we're still in a system where all of these restaurants, like the restaurant like industry, just restaurants, right, is anti-fragile, it's just like it's going to keep going, and doesn't volatility doesn't affect it, makes it stronger. Um, but we're still in a system where each one is like their own like entity. And when and the people in that entity fail, right? Like then they're,
Right.
like,
That has an impact for
yeah, it has
those
an
individuals.
impact. Yeah,
Yeah.
they go down. So, right. So, not to like, not to try and, so it's not to try and shift it so that way, like these, like, the individual entities don't fail, right? And using that word fail just as a, word,
Yeah.
but not to try and change it so they don't fail, but that there's a way where like like that doesn't have to be, that doesn't have to like affect, the individual so much, or that the group, the larger system or entity, sort of supports everybody,
Hmm.
so they all understand that they're in a sense, they're all in it together,
Hmm.
like my Thai restaurant isn't, like in like this direct competition with that, like Chinese restaurant across the street or something, but it's
Right.
like, oh, we're kind of all in it together. And so like, yeah, how do we,
Yeah.
yeah, how do we all kind of support each other? So that way it's not, like nobody has to go down like super hard,
Right.
even though like we understand that the system, sort of you know,
Right.
requires this kind of like
Right.
constant turnover. So yeah,
But you're saying just it brings up this question for me of like, is there actually are there actually real parts of the economy, real sectors or industries or local, like you're saying, like a certain strata of the like restaurants, or plumbers or teachers or whatever. Like, is there actual competition in any of those one layers? Or is it just some idea that we've got from like multi-billion dollar corporations that are actually competitive with each other on an economic level? Like, my brother is a restaurant person in the Berkshires. I never hear him talk about competition among the restaurateurs, and he's an executive chef. He was running the budget. He's hiring staff. He's,
yeah,
worked at many restaurants since the pandemic that have folded and had to reconfigure and it's been a disaster. But I don't hear a thread of competition really. And then in
yeah,
this area, you know, we've got so many home birth midwives, and I thought maybe someday I would study to be a midwife, like way back before I had kids, right? And so I talked to my midwife trainer, my doula trainer at the time. I didn't have my own kids, and talked to her about that competition, you know, like, is this area saturated? And she's like, no way, no way. We are not in competition with each other. There's enough work. Like, there's a culture here that supports this.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, this whole idea of competition on the scale that we function on, that we work on professionally, maybe it's just not a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Because, you know, if you take it to like in another, yeah, I mean, if you look at like, okay, like professional services providers, or you look at like, you know, healers, right? Or you look at like, take even what like life coaches or something, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's a way where, yeah, I don't know that like if you talk to life coaches, they say they're like, yeah, I'm really like, you know, like had this day to day sort of like I'm competing against, you know, other life coaches or health and wellness practitioners.
Right.
Like they probably don't have that, like, yeah, feel that sort of like that mindset,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so many, you know, and it's, but
Right.
you
But
know,
then
in
if you
this
think about
way,
it in
in this,
terms of pricing, yeah, go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, in this way that you're talking about, yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I want to, yeah, I'd like to, it's good to ponder. But I do think that there is, you know, this is, you know, what I've been saying, my contention, there is a way where like they all still are competing against each other, like on a systemic level.
Mm.
Um, you know, because there is like markets do get saturated, and maybe not the
Mm-hmm.
doula market, you know, now, but like markets do get saturated.
Mm.
And so, you know, as that happens, right, then there is, you know, with our market economy, there is a you know, like an inherent competition, you
Mm.
know, for that market, you know, at whatever size that market is, right? And it, you know, changes,
Yeah.
but it's right, but it is sort of measurable.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
right, and if I, you know, if it's like there's whatever, you know, 4 million life coaches, you know, and there's a certain sort of like size market at any time, you know, if I jump in, then I'm another person. Um, you know, even if I'm not sort of like, you know, I don't know if it would be, you know, culturally, or even if I'm not sort of saying, you know, feeling like I'm in competition,
Mm.
or you know, at that like the heart of it, right? You know, is it
Mm.
like you said with restaurants, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like there's
I
different
just, that was a,
realities. Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
And that was just a jumping off from the anti-fragility. I think I love that consideration of what makes a network anti-fragile. Um, yeah, I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. Um, yeah, I mean, I can tell you the big, but I also like what you're saying. You know, I think that that's something that, you know, that's, and I think the restaurant business is a really good example. You know, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot, but you know, if this way where like they're not the individual entities like probably aren't, you know, like
No, the reason the restaurants are struggling is because costs are up and staff are nowhere to be found.
yeah.
Reliable staff.
Yeah. Yeah, like the restaurant, you know, sort of owners and they're probably, you know, like they're probably, I would imagine more often than not, like connecting with each other, you know, and sort of like
Yeah,
sharing what's going
yeah,
on. And yeah,
yeah. And my brother, yeah, like, you know, like they know each other. These people know each other who are running the businesses, and they'd
yeah,
be like, "Oh my God, we were sold out all weekend," or "Oh man, it was dead this month and we're really worried," or, you know, the price of paper goods is just through the roof because the, you know, economy's weird and that's hard for every restaurant. And, you know, they can't
yeah,
really afford to undersell each other in a competitive way because then they'd be giving food away for free because the cost of the food is the same for every one of them, you know, like,
Yeah.
like that's the thing too. I was thinking about it. If you have 8,000 life coaches and I jump in and I charge half of what other people are charging, then maybe I look pretty attractive, but I probably look pretty dumb too.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like,
Yeah. Or like, oh, well,
right?
like you're starting out,
Like I'm
so there's
starting
definitely
out and,
less
I'm going to
experience.
work
So
with
they're,
people who can afford that ticket. And,
yeah,
and I think I see a lot of practitioners who want to be comparably priced to their peers, not necessarily competitively priced, They
yeah,
want to know like, what's the cost for a massage in the area, roughly? And I want to be in that ballpark based on my experience and my overhead and my whatever. You
yeah,
know what I mean? I don't need to outstripe everybody by $200.
yeah,
Just doesn't seem useful,
totally.
really.
Yeah,
Unless you've reached some crazy level of mastery and you only want to do 2 sessions a week or whatever,
yeah. Or you're booked out, 4 months in advance or something, right? Because and then, yeah. Um, but it's interesting, and I like this restaurant example, right? And it was in the book, so there's, I guess, a
Yeah.
reason, but it's a good example, right? Because I like the concept of that, is basically like that. There's three, like we're thinking about like that the basic framework, is like fragile, or like robust or resilient.
Hmm.
So something is like fragile. It's like, we know it's fragile. It's, going to break easily, right? So like volatility or change, um, is difficult
Right.
for it,
Like
right? So
how
like,
stressful is that? Yeah.
yeah, like my mug, we'd say, oh, this is, pretty fragile, because it's like if I drop it, like it's like, probably likely to break. Whereas, we might say like my plastic water
Mhm.
bottle, is pretty, is more robust. Because I can huck it against the wall, nothing's really going to happen to it. Yeah, it's right, it's going to decay and, at some point,
I
but
know, but it's plastic. It bounces. It has a forgiving texture different than your ceramic mug, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then there's like, but that there's a like a third category of that, because
Mm.
robust is still, like it still doesn't get like stronger with volatility. Like
Uh-huh.
every time I throw it against the wall or drop it, like it's getting closer and closer to cracking.
Right. Right.
And then there's this another category, which is like anti-fragility, which
Mm.
is like, an example is like your bones, right? We know like if you leave if you just are, whatever, bedridden, your bones start to get less strong. But the
Mm.
more that you use them, the more volatility and you're bouncing on your, in your body, whatever, the bones, get stronger. So
Right.
it's like fragility. And, it's not that things are always like, right. And like, like the most anti-fragile, you know, thing, right, is nature.
Mm.
Because, yeah, the more stressors that come to it, the more it's able to adapt and evolve.
Mm.
Yeah. So, yeah. And so, you can look at, right, like what parts of humans, right, like what parts of us, like we're not all anti-fragile, we're not all so like what parts, so it's like looking at, then you can look at systems, things like that. So you said you were interested, so I gave you kind of the,
Yeah, I am interested. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I'm curious about the strengthening of the skills, of the how do we do that, right?
yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And to be like thinking about that. I know, and I even like, there's some like ideas or books or concepts you find, and you're just like, you get like really into it. And I'm usually like, because I'm always like, I wear like still my masks, a lot because I'm like, I haven't got COVID, right? So I'm like, well, maybe it works. And I just kind of stopped wearing my mask. I'm like, oh, am I making myself too fragile? So, um, but there's something, right? There's something that's interesting in this restaurant example because we're talking about like restaurants not competing against each other. I think, it feels like, and you tell me if you had a different conception, we're talking about like, at least we're, especially us where we live, like I think our minds could go to like, it, local owners, so like individual restaurants owned by, individual people or groups, or maybe there's like, 3 or 4 or 5 around the valley,
Right,
but still it's still local entities, right?
right.
And they're not really thinking about each other as competition, right? Because they're sort of like, yeah, we're in this, and in this area together. And but does that change like when restaurants are, get big enough, like that they're like corporate chains, you
Yeah.
know? So there's what's that one on, like by on Route 9 by Home Depot, the Texas Steakhouse or something?
You tell me, I'll believe you.
Yeah. I think it's called Texas Steakhouse, or Chili's, right? Something like
Yeah.
that, right? These are like, big chains. So do they like, does the man, does the chef or the manager, of that Chili's have that same mindset? As far as like competition? Or does the, does do like the, do the real like top decision makers of Chili's have that same mindset?
Mm,
Or are they like, yeah, we are in competition, like, or is their mindset more, we are in competition, we're in competition with Applebee's, we're in competition with, Texas Steakhouse, we're in competition for like the restaurant market in this area, like where are we putting our restaurants? So that way,
mm,
um, I don't know, I don't actually, I don't know an answer to that, but
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know either. Yeah. In terms of like HSC, we're talking about like the relational aspect. Like the more we relate, the more we build skills, the more resilient we are relationally, right? So that's just to circle back to that, like the more the value exchanges are on, the more we're
Mm,
like, I'm passing you a brick and you're passing one to Newman and you're making sure to try not to throw it too fast or too slow or,
yeah,
and
yeah,
anybody knows with the brick, the project, whatever the project is,
yeah,
um, that, that, that's the like anti-fragility project, right? Is the doing, the practicing of it, but then it sounds like the book also maybe is talking about scale and like how big is your network, like, and we talk about that a lot with HSC, like what's the growth curve, what's the goal in terms of how big is this network. And you know when a governance circle has 2 members and one person's sick and can't make the meeting, and is there a meeting? No, there's no meeting, right? But if it's 7 members and 3 people can't come, there's still like a quorum. It's more than
yeah,
50%, whatever we decide our governance structure is.
yeah,
But
yeah,
possibility of that kind of like resilience, right? Like that bounce back, like there's a stress on the system and there's still enough of a network to hold it, right?
yeah, 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 absolutely.
And that's what I'm hearing, like in the idea of like the restaurants, and it's like, how do we consider and care for the individual restaurant, but also acknowledge that the network as a whole is not at risk?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And what level and I was, chatting, like last week, with Christine and she had a really good point, of like there's, you know, like at what levels, of as like trust, are we like how is that being like distributed within certain groups of certain size, right? Because if we
Mm,
have, if we want to get to scale, that means there's more robustness, or maybe anti-fragility. I don't know, like, but like, but then how much trust, you know, can there be between, you know, like 1,000 different people or 500 different people, right? Like there's different levels, you know, of trust.
Right.
You know, and we're trying to sort of, you know, create reputation and, you know, figure out how to do that. But like, you know, how to facilitate, you know, what does trust look like, you know, for like large amounts of people?
Mm-hmm.
How do we facilitate that? What does that look like, you know? And then are there, you know, we've talked about this, right? Like, are there, you know, smaller pods, right? That are like, you know, of groups that, you know, sort of pod together where there's like able to be a different level of like trust and relationship than, you know, whatever the other, you know, 990 people or something.
Right.
And then, yeah, working groups, whatever. Yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what
I
should
just had this
we,
thought that like in
go
my
ahead.
ideal world, I think there would be like a cap on HSC membership. I
Mm,
don't have any interest in seeing it grow exponentially, like past 100, 150, 200 members. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine it going there, you know, just yet, but in terms of the bigger overall vision, like it'd be cool if it was like a very robust, resilient, anti-fragile network that could inspire other networks to do the same. But I'm not interested in really, as I think about it, in a specific network having unlimited growth. I I don't see the point. Because like you said, and it's just gonna need to branch off into smaller things and and how do people stay related and engaged and meaningful about it, you know, and useful.
yeah,
Uh, that's just the thought
totally.
that I had, you know.
It's a great thought. I think you're speaking to something, yeah, that there's, you know, is a lot of, you know, I've heard, you know, already a lot of, you know, like discussion on it and ideas around that. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and a lot of it comes from, right, like working with Haifa, right? And
Mm,
Haifa is, you know, is like this, you know, meant to be this DAO, you know, this ecosystem, you know, this DAO ecosystem, you know, that are of still autonomous entities, you know, autonomous DAOs, but that are all interconnected, you know, and that do have like a, you know, you know, some kind of stake in each other, you know, in the
mm.
ecosystem. Um, right. And there's this
Is it
number, like
working?
I think one of them is called like the Dunbar number, right? There's some person that studied it. And I
Oh
think, you
yeah,
know,
how many relationships can you sustain? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So something that, you know, 144 or something like that. I think, you know, just like what you're saying. So like, but yeah. So how does it scale, right? And can it scale, you know, infinitely, or can it like, I don't know, you know, but like there's something where I think I think these numbers are, you know, important, and like, and how does the, right, like, how does the organism, you know, I think the organism, right, is like a fractal, if you think about it. And you can think about, you know, like a fractal organism, right? So how, you know, what are the different fractals? How big are those, you know, groups of people? And what
Hmm.
is like each fractal sort of like, you know, each, you know, bigger, you know, in smaller size, what is that purpose?
Hmm.
And then how big does the whole, you know, if it's like a fern or whatever, you know, how big does the whole organism grow?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, because to me, right, like I don't feel like 144 people sharing, you know, value with each other. That to me, that doesn't feel like it has enough people in it to really like, you know, create like the level of um, you know, like power,
Mm.
you know, or, you know, robustness or resiliency that, you know, that I'd like to see in a not, you know, my ideal vision, right?
Right. Okay.
Right, because it's like a connect, you know, it's like, yeah, you take, you know, if one of those 144, you know, like entities, you know, in some respect, you know, even if this model is taken into a, you know, locality, you know, sort of falls hard, can the other 143, like, how much can they support that person?
Mhm.
You know, how much, you know, especially, yeah. So, but then, yeah, so then how to, right, like, but then how to have like different groups of 144, like but there's certain ways where like that 144 is enough, like, you know, as far as like, you know, sort of like just community support,
Right.
right? Like that's good. And then you're saying if you get more than that, then actually that starts to degrade like relationships and trust.
Right.
But is there value that can be exchanged between different, you know, different like groups of 144,
Right.
right? That makes each of those groups then more robust and resilient because there's a larger network.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so I think that that's a, you know, I like these, you know, these frameworks, right? And like these, you know, and a DAO, right? And the, you know, is and the ecosystem and the fractals, you know, is an interesting framework for that.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I had a I had a question, slight change of topic, if that's okay. We come back to
Yeah,
it.
totally. Yeah, I mean, I
Yep.
was sort of thinking, I'm like, oh, is there, you know, is there more like operational stuff, you know, we should, you know, we could jump into or things like that. But what's, you know, and we haven't really, I haven't even gone look, you know, been able to look over your agenda.
Oh, my agenda. There's a lot of flexibility in that agenda, depending on how many people show up and who they are and what they want to do.
Yeah, yeah, right.
It was a very
That's right.
open-ended
That's
couple
another one of
weeks.
these things, you know, the less people at a meeting, you know, the more loose an agenda can be.
Right. And well, that's the thing about the networks too. Like the larger the network, the more need there is for like structure and protocols, I
mm,
think. And the smaller the network, the more flexibility, the more like ease of like responsiveness, I think happens.
yeah,
So there's that piece too, um, of like what is human scale? Like what actually does that mean? Yeah. Um,
yeah,
anyway, this other question keeps popping up in my mind, and I thought HSC would be an interesting place to bring it forward, which is about like the environmental demand of AI. And I know, for example, like you did a little AI summary of a meeting recently and just like put that in there. And that was entertaining to see, you know, what kind of summary an AI would come up with. But then of course I'm reading that the the environmental demand of like every AI query is like potentially very high. And
mm,
so how do we, I'm curious to hear from like more people about how to hold that every time like Google uses an AI to answer my little random Google question, it's like pouring a stupid amount of water on the ground. Like good, clean drinking water is just disappearing because the tech for AI uses energy and heating and needs cooling or something like that.
yeah,
So I was just wondering if that's on your radar. And then I was curious about other HSC members who have more understanding of the new technologies, and we all have high environmental values. I heard that a lot in the visioning kind of process, you know, and yet we all use technology a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. It's a great question. Um, yeah, it's a great question. I really appreciate it. And I don't know that it's something that I don't even know that I've really considered that much, you know,
Mm,
and I'm using AI a lot
mm,
just in my, you know, day-to-day, you know, digital world.
right. And then I know that we, you know, tossed about, what kind of, other currencies. And then I just remember years ago touching slightly the reality that all these like blockchain or whatever, that they're also demanding a lot of energy to just exist.
Mhm. Well,
Um,
that has, I mean, that has shifted and continues to.
oh, good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like Bitcoin still demands a lot of energy, but
Okay.
the, next generations of blockchain have figured, have figured out
Okay.
ways to do that on, have these blockchains running on a much smaller amount of energy resource needed.
Right.
Yeah. Which is, and there's a whole argument about like, oh, I mean, these, right, like it's decentralized, so these things take on a life of their own. But there's a, there's this argument about like, hey, like maybe Bitcoin shouldn't be like the one, the like the sort of standard, of like,
Mm.
digital currency, right? Because it's, it does use so much energy.
Mm.
But that's a whole other thing. Um, I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, maybe I'll bring it up again,
Yeah,
there's more people. I haven't had people like in my life recently to like toss the idea around with,
totally,
so I
totally.
bring it here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's, there's something like, I mean, I'm calling it like a knowledge holder.
Mm.
Um, I guess it's a kind of expertise, but that's like an example of like, again, this vision or dream I have, in this group, of something called like a knowledge holder, which is like, there's so many things, there's like that affect, right? It's like each of these issues, right? There's lots of issues, right? And it's like, okay, well, there's like plastic and there's like, like recycling. Does my recycling, like, does it even get recycled? What do I do? How do I live, like that's just one sort of issue. Then there's like AI. What are the, like I have done some research on like, like where's there are actually people getting exploited, in the AI world, because you have like
Mm.
people feeding stuff. Right.
Right.
So where's there an exploitation there? And then we're talking, well, what are the environmental effects? And then it's like, well, okay, well, what do we do about it? So
Right.
there's like, hundreds and hundreds of like these issues, right? And it's like, and I get overwhelmed because I'm like, I can't, like I can't like sort of like dig deep into all of them. I
Mm.
don't have the resource, like, well, like animal, like, meat, right? And like humanely raised animals. That's like a big one for me, right? So I've done lots of research, right? And dug in
Mm.
and, just continued learning, right? So I might be a knowledge holder in that area, but like there's, I was talking to my housemate about like GMOs, right? It's like, I don't know. Is GMO like actually bad? Is it good? I don't have a freaking clue, like,
Right. Right.
so I wish there was this kind of like a group, where there, again, here's trust again. Like there's a group of people that sort of have a certain level of trust where we can say, you know what, Sai, that's great. Can you be the knowledge holder? Can you research that and just like say like, come back with a report,
Right.
and be like, these are the effects, these are the things we can do. This is what we could do as a group, like this is some, a way where like we may just have to live with it, that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, I don't know. I really like that idea because I think it's another way of like a collective group essentially having more power,
Yeah.
than an individual. Like I'm pretty overwhelmed with as just an individual with the what to do about all the fucking problems in the world.
Right. Right.
But but there are certain ones, like if I take sort of certain ones, like I can only handle so many, but right, like there's specific ones where it's like, all right, I'm gonna dig deep and I'm gonna go past just the first
Mm.
couple, hits on Google and right, and now and and really and be in it. It's like now I have, I have a certain expertise, but it's not like it's a different kind, it's not like professional expertise, in a say, like, okay, you're have expertise in, branding or copywriting.
Right. Right.
So just, yeah, sharing that.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So I don't know how, yeah. But that came up from your question.
Yeah.
Am I like, oh God, another thing to have to figure out? You know?
No, no, I'm not expecting you to. I just, yeah, I want to engage in certain dialogues and see what understandings people have, or what collaborative understandings we can kind of come to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think I feel that, right? I'm just sort of like sharing that, but it's like, oh yeah, that's important, right?
Mm,
Especially if it's something that I'm using, and like, right. And what can I do about it? So I appreciate the question.
mm, yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
cool, cool.
Yeah. I think I need to take a quick body break for a couple minutes, and then I'll be back.
Okay, let's do it. I'm gonna
You know, we could do, if there were like 5 people or something, for example, I was going to ask, um, does that represent any of the circles that are forming? And do those people want to do some break off time and start to grasp, like, what is the real description of our circle, and what are the tasks, and what are we sort of propose this circle be as it is forming?
yeah,
But we don't have that kind of cohort today.
yeah.
Um, so it's kind of, and then when I was like, and if it's a really small group, we could also just decide to do co-working. That's fine too.
That's
Can
true.
like set some intentions and dive into our own stuff for 45 minutes and then check back in. So yeah, that was all possible. Um so what are you said you have a specific topic or some ideas?
Yeah, I think, something that has been on my mind, right? And I know I mentioned it a couple of times or in email, and something else is right, is like our meeting structure. And we had a whole, that's the notes that I was reviewing from it looks like the 18th, we had some time
Yeah.
that where we talked specifically about that. Um
Yeah.
yeah, and right, it isn't that, my thought if we go over that today isn't for us to like make any decisions, but it's something I hadn't really like um had time to kind of like review notes and wrap my head around. I think there's a way where it might be like we have had discussions about it and sort of sense making, and I think there's a way where I don't know, whoever it would be, to kind of take all that and say and like maybe come up with the start of a proposal.
Okay.
Because I think, because right now we are just, as far as meetings, we're going a little bit on autopilot, with the community meetings, um and if we want to really start delving into circles,
Yeah.
then and also kind of define like what is our, like what are the community meetings and our, um yeah. So do you want to just kind of, we could workshop that a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think the idea is not to necessarily come up with like, oh, this is like, the best way to do it, but to come up with like, oh, these might be like, this might be a proposal, or these might be like two different sort of like proposal structures.
Mhm.
And then I think it could be helpful to then, talk, right, like bring that in and just start to clarify, because it does feel like, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? But that does feel like a piece that feels like it'd be good to at least, for like the short term kind of have everybody on the same page about.
Yep. Yep. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So let's I actually want to I want to share, something, because I was thinking about this, a little bit and reviewing notes. And then I was like, well, how have I been doing meetings? That like may be a
Mm,
good place to start, right? Because I've been facilitating these meetings. We have these community meetings, and um, there's a way where I was like, right, like, and the word sort of like magic comes to mind, right? So you know, to break down, I'm like, well, what's my style, you know? And if I think about it, I'm like, usually, you know, I have agenda items, you know, and then there's like kind of questions, you know, I try and come like prepared. And
Yeah.
then, and especially like a lot of meetings, you know, I like coming like, this is agenda item A, B, C, D, you know, that we wouldn't even get through. But there is a way where I think I sort of naturally come and like feel like into like where's the magic in the meeting, you know, like where's the magic with the people, you know, because different people show up, you know, and like where, and you know, in some meetings, you know, like right, like there some meetings like naturally sort of go to like more like kind of, you know, just talking about things, you know, and sort of sharing and sense making and, you know, more in this kind of like, the term I keeps coming in is like juicy, more in this kind of like, you know, juicy
Mm.
way, and does have more to do with like, you know, it comes, it sort of feels like there is a lot of like culture building and relationship building,
Hmm.
because we're sort of talking about the things I mean, I think a lot of that is what you and I were doing the first hour.
Hmm.
You know, we weren't really like addressing any like sort of real specific kind of operational piece, or but we were talking about like, hey, this is, you know, like this is something I've been thinking about with HSC, and I'd like to do this, or this is a vision, you know, and like how are our visions matching, and then how are they popping off each other?
Yep.
And then right, and those feel, you know, those feel important, right? And they're not, you know, they're not necessarily as like specifically directed. But then sometimes, you know, it's like there are meetings where where you know there are more important like agenda items, you know, and I'll be like, hey, let's, you know, like let's do like real quick check-ins because we have, you know, this stuff going on, right? And
Right. Like we're really going to focus on some things. Yeah.
yeah, you know, so let's
Mhm.
kind of like, you know, dig into that, right? So there's ones where it's really just like, hey, there's like a specific agenda and we need to talk about it, you know, we need to like go, you know, workshop this. You know, and then there's kind of some in between ones, right? There's this sort of
Mhm.
way that we there's like a, you know, we're saying a general framework I think that we've been going with, which is like 40 minutes, you know, first the human heartbeat, you know, the next 40 minutes structural heartbeat, you know, which is more about like, okay, how are we structuring it? And then last 40 minutes operational. I'm just naming that to say, like, I think those are, I think what that did was it helped me to kind of like at least break down like what we have been doing and what some of
Mm.
like the purposes of the meeting, you know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't know if we should take notes or if but I think there's a way where like, yeah, if we're breaking that, you know, down like, oh, this is the purpose of this is the purpose of that, then we can say like, okay, then it might be good to just, you know, like rather than sort of like, you know, show up and sort of see how it goes, say, oh, well, this is this kind of meeting and this is that kind of meeting, or get more, um, you know, get more structured and saying, hey, this is what a community meeting means,
Mm.
um, you know, because then there's also like, you know, what the way I'm thinking about like a member, you know, like member experience meeting, you know, where you know, members come together. So, okay, hey, let's go over value exchange. Hey, let's everybody do like workshop our needs and offerings, you know, for 10 minutes and then, you know, go over those. Let's everybody jump over to coordinate. Let's everybody, you know, sort of doing that. Um, yeah. So that's, but I haven't sort of like figured out how to, you know, like, and then of course we have circle meetings like we've talked about. And then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. An opportunity for that.
yeah. And here's so I don't know if you
And
have
of course, like
thoughts to pop
yeah.
in there, but then we could also go over like you know, like the notes from that last meeting.
Mhm.
But I want to pause there.
Yeah. And then there's also the types of meetings that, well, we have Skillshare, and there could also be a category of meetings or half a meeting that's about like workshop, that's about um someone either in HSC or a guest teacher is coming to teach about certain relational skills or practicing some kind of dialogue model, or, like there's those workshop opportunities too. And that's a different type of meeting. It's to work on a specific part of the culture, or it's to talk about, we're going to workshop, class background and how that shows up in our lives and our work and our collaboration. Like, I have a different class background than you do. And what are the values of that I come in with that I may or may not be super aware of, and how that plays out. And that's like, some of my fantasy is to be doing some of that kind of work and consciousness raising.
Yeah.
But, it's a workshop idea, right? It's a culture building type time, type of meeting time. It's not operations, it's not Skillshare, it's not, I mean, it is sort of Skillshare, but different.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I'm making notes, right? Because those are like different, we're calling them, we could just call them all, we could say, hey, these are like skill shares, but there's like different kinds of skill shares. Right.
Right.
But you talked about like, yeah, workshops, and then there's sort of like the skill shares that we're used to, like by members, but then there's also sometimes in more, some like collabs, things like that.
Yep.
Right. And then there's, yeah, I'm just gonna make some notes and
Yeah.
or
I see
jot
what you're
down
doing.
like from what I said. I don't know. What did you, I don't know. I saw you like jotting something down.
Oh, maybe
Talking.
you don't know this. This is what I do.
Ah, okay. Yeah, you mentioned that last time. Yeah.
So I have some notes, which is like things I thought of that I wanted to mention while I was listening to you talk, but I've already mentioned them.
Okay.
And then I doodle. So I don't always take notes.
Your doodles are fab.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see.
Yeah, take your time.
I'm just gonna like go over, jot down what I said. I don't know. It's helpful for me to break down what are it's sort of like what are all the kinds and what are all the purposes,
Right.
um um, just say um, let's see. All right, I think I wrote down what I was thinking about
Yeah,
in
looks good.
oh great, thanks. Yeah, do you want to review, then take that and now and review our I'll share the screen, but review the notes from that time we were talking a few weeks ago? It was, yeah.
Yeah, I can skim down to that. It's easier for me to read on my own than on a screen share.
Okay.
So, yeah, so
Oh, here, questions about meetings. Yeah, I'll just right. So the 18th, and then like you have to scroll down to that area, and I'll turn off the skill share.
yeah, got it.
I'll turn
I
off the
see
screen the screen share.
it.
Let's see.
Yeah, so different ideas about what the meetings can be for, how they feel. Some meetings have a set goal, some are more open-ended.
Mm. Yeah, Newman was talking about some like practicalities and some of his experience.
Yeah.
Mm. Right. We had that open spaces idea, which I know you mentioned or brought in. Other folks might have that as well, but I remember you talking about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's talking about like circles. Hmm.
I mean, sort of immediate thought is that to engage folks in coming to meetings, it seems to help when there's a clear intention that's planted for that meeting,
Yeah.
to say like, hey, we're gonna be doing blah, like be great if you show up for it, and here's some ideas to think about. And people may or may not think about it in advance, but that there's basically some marketing of the meeting, or of what's might be expected or might be gained, or what their participation might mean.
Yeah.
So, next week, Skillshare, I'm looking at the calendar. I mean, I don't know if Zoe has planned for someone to do that Skillshare, or if it's her. Don't really have a beat on
Yeah.
that.
I was in touch with her yesterday. I think I think she's planning on doing it herself.
Okay.
She hadn't totally figured it out, but it seems like she was thinking about something similar to last time, but
Yeah.
like expanding it beyond just like social media, which
Yeah.
the term I'm using, I think, is something like like a collab.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
yeah.
Cool. So it might be useful to think ahead then about, the next couple meetings in July and what would be most useful and engaging, and it may be that there's not a lot of engagement in July, summer, blah, blah, blah. That's fine, but be good to have a plan,
Yeah, yeah. So then that brings me to sort of like the question of what are, so first of all, to say, yeah, I think you're right. I think even if it's like, hey, we're going to come and we're going to sort of like, generally talk about this, people will come, but there is this idea. So, that brings the question of like, I do like the idea of saying, hey, this is like our community meeting,
Mm.
maybe maybe that isn't something, or so, so far, right? Like there's what I do like is having sort of a meeting where we say, this is like this is a meeting that is open to the public, right? I do like having these like open sort of like, any potential entryway meetings, that anybody can drop into, because I think over time we've also seen that people like that, they like show up and they're like, oh, I'm just here, I'll be a fly on the wall, and we're like, no, you participate like anybody, right? And it's so, but I do think that right, there's this idea of like, okay, well, what is that meeting about? Like, not, other than just, somebody can come. It's like, well, okay, what are we doing there?
Right.
And is it, like, do we need to like sort of each time choose, because again, like I've been like the question for me, right? Like I said, I'm coming with this a lot of times with this way of, sometimes there's something, there's clear, but when there's not like a super clear agenda, it's more like, okay, well, where are the people? What's the magic? Do people want to talk about agenda items A, B, and C, or are they just like, do people just get on a fucking roll, and go, and then it's 2 hours later, and everybody's like, oh, okay, that was cool. Yeah, so I hmm. Like that, so like that works for me, but I'm fine sort of showing up each time with, an okay, like a plan if we need it, but also seeing where the, magic goes. But I don't know if that works for everybody,
Yeah, I don't, I, I don't know. My observation is it's not engaging enough people. I'm not sure like what you're sort of noticing the trends of how many people show up depending on how much intention is kind of put forward in advance. You
Mm,
know,
yeah,
um, I'm kind of also on the track of like, this is a built-in part of my week and I'll do my best just to show up. It doesn't matter what the plan
yeah,
is, I'll do my best to show up. But I don't think that's true for everyone.
yeah,
In fact, it's evidently not true for a lot of people. They show up based on, oh, it's a Skillshare, cool. Or,
yeah,
oh, something particularly exciting or engaging, I'll show up for that, cool. Or I can only come to half, but that's better than nothing and it's a cool topic, so I'll be there for half.
yeah,
Great. People are stretching to make it because it's engaging.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a really good question. And I think if I think about it, and you tell me if this feels true, but if I think about it, usually I think I do usually come with like some specific like topics or ideas or intentions,
They
'Cause
usually do. Usually
yeah,
do. Yeah. Yeah.
because
I
usually
think
actually
that's
I feel
true. And
like
it's
I'm
usually like
coming with like,
in,
go ahead.
yeah. No, it's usually like a very clear invite, like usually in the email to say, hey, this is what some topics are, or coming with this, idea of, but yeah, but then you have a flexibility also in how
Hmm.
that unfolds. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Because actually, if I think about it, I mean, I think I would say more often than not, I have like a very clear agenda, and that I like want to work on, especially I know it's
Yeah.
been, I haven't been, the last month or so, right? Like I haven't had as much time, But usually if I'm in it, I'm like, hey, you know, like I want to work on A, B, and C. And then we get there,
Totally.
and then it's sort of like, despite that, like we don't get to it, you know, because people we sort of
Mm,
like go off on a topic, and right. And then I think there's a way where if people are in this space and they're very engaged, you know, that I don't want to like hammer everybody back into an agenda.
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think it's great to be sensitive to that.
yeah. Um, hmm. Thanks. It's helping. I mean, um, you know, so maybe like right, like maybe the community meetings, you know, where we could maybe what we have, you know, if we say consciously like, oh, okay, this is going to be like our, you know, this is like the basic, you know, kind of topic, or these are the real agenda items, you know, for this week, right? So there is a plan. There's, uh, you know, and then even keep that sort of general like three heartbeat sort of structure,
Hmm.
and then maybe just have the understanding that of like, and everybody can, you know, including the facilitator, have the understanding of like, hey, how, you know, like this group that's here now, you know, how much do we want to, you know, rein ourselves in, you know, to sort of stay on that structure, and how much are we like, is it okay to let it flow?
Yeah. It's a balance too of those, like, of what sort of energies are in the space. You know how I brought up the like
Yeah,
leadership energy, like not everyone who comes to the meetings wants to co-lead the meeting.
yeah,
Everyone wants to take initiative to say, oh, right, we could do it this way or we could do it that way. And so then it's like, if someone has a leadership role or a leadership energy to say, like, hey, this is a plan I came up with, shall we go with that? In my experience as a facilitator, most people are like, yeah, let's go with that. Or I might offer two options and be like, at this point, we could turn in this direction or we could turn that way. Some
yeah,
people are, there's a clear enthusiasm in one direction or the other, but there's a, in some of our meetings, there's like a reluctance to lead with some members. And I want to honor that. Not everyone comes to have a leadership quality or a collaborative directional quality, but they want to be there because they're clearly in alignment with the most of the values of what's happening.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah, totally. And not everyone, I mean, right, like usually, right, I'm like, I am excited and happy to be in, you know, in leadership. But there's sometimes, right, you know, there's some, like sometimes when I, especially, you know, like you're facilitating the meeting, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like I can take it, you know, I can be like other
Right.
people and whatever, turn my
That's
camera
right.
off or zone
That's
out or
right.
something, you know, and
Totally. Yeah. Or think about the topic instead of thinking about the facilitation. Like I'm
yeah,
really upfront. I can't take notes if I'm facilitating because what I'm doing is tracking the topics and the conversation and the who's engaged
yeah,
and who didn't share yet. And no, no, like I'm doing something else.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. It's good. It's just, it's helpful for me to break down like, what am I doing? Because I think I know what I'm doing, but sometimes I'm, you know, like
Mm,
I
hmm.
just kind of, you know, like like I feel it, you know,
Right. Right.
rather than, yeah, I don't know. I'm a weird person, combination of all these things.
You're so human. You're so human.
I am very particularly human, you know? Yeah, that's for sure. I'm downright human.
Downright so darn human,
I
man.
know. Uh,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah,
see.
you haven't transcended yet. Sorry. You're not a god yet.
Not yet. No, no, not yet. It didn't happen yesterday, my birthday, but maybe next
Not
year.
on your birthday. It didn't happen on retreat. So,
It didn't happen on retreat. That was my retreat intention, to transcend, you know, my humanness.
transcend humanity. Yeah.
Yeah, and become either enlightened or a god, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I asked for a refund. So that's still in.
Oh, that's in the works. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
in the works. Yeah. I didn't read the fine print. I'm not sure if that was actually, a promise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right.
That'd be some competitive marketing there. Hey, we promised transcendence from our retreat, or you get a refund.
Yeah, it'd be amazing marketing. Probably be if, as long as they offered the refunds, that would be probably go out of business quick.
I know, I know, I know.
Let me see. Okay, so that's good. So that's actually, I mean, I like that, right? So that's like you're saying, okay, this is what our community meetings are for, They're for the community. They are to like, it's not like for one thing, but it's like, to like get stuff done, to have an agenda, or I mean, to have, to like one day it might be sense making, one day it might be like, oh, okay, let's go over this operational stuff.
Mhm.
But I think to be clear, and to say like, yeah, come every time and say like, yeah, this is, like come here, we're doing stuff and we're, it's going to make forward progress in our community.
Right.
Whether it's right, whether it's all three heartbeats or end up on, concentrating on one or two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Um, okay. So then we kind of know what skill shares are basically. We have circle meetings. And then the question is, is there a separate like member experience meeting?
That can mean a lot of things. When I hear member experience, I got
Yeah,
a I got a lot of possibilities of what that could mean.
yeah. Like what?
Member experience can be like community building activities, can be like that relational piece. It could be um sort of like we're gonna have once we open to like a bunch of new members, we're gonna need some kind of intro orientation type of meetings also, or type of
Mm,
time frame. um I think
yeah.
that it doesn't all have to be done one-on-one hand holding, because nobody's got that kind of time. That there might be some more
Hmm.
group format for, here's the cooperative, here's how you participate, here's the platform for that, here's how, no, 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 no. um and then you said something earlier about how member experience can be also about going over the needs and offerings, value exchanges, coordinate, like, yeah, that can be member experience. It's I want more language, I guess.
Yeah,
Member experience is broad for me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think,
I get it. It's not meant to be governance. It's separate from governance. That part I understand.
yeah,
And it's not exactly a skill share, but a skill share is a member experience. So there's a certain differentiation here that I'm not quite solid on.
yeah, yeah. I don't know that I am either. I think, um, yeah, and maybe there's, because like I think that there's like the member experience circle, but I don't think that's like what we're talking about here.
No, this is types of meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of
Yeah.
mapping out different types of meetings that could be hosted or have purpose, or be scheduled and serve serve a purpose.
Yeah. Because it's almost like, I mean, member experience, I think, is maybe, it could be like what one or some of these meetings are called, but it's also sort of feels like at the current time, like a placeholder
Yeah.
for, right, like a community building activity, right? That could just be its own meeting. That could be those could be one-off things. Those could be
Yep.
yeah, orientation intro meetings, right? That could be, right. Those could just, sort of be part of like onboarding.
Yeah.
When I think of it, if I sort of say, oh, member experience, right? To me, what comes to that is like the members coming together and doing like, doing these membery things,
Mm.
going over like, oh, this like it could just be like, these kind of continuing things where it's like, hey, today we're going to go over the member portal, and,
Mm.
for 20 minutes, we're going to go sort of take people through the different parts, right? And that's like 20
Mm.
minutes. And then we might, okay, then like, one of those times we go through and we work on our needs and offerings. And we do, yeah, sort of like those things that maybe that
Yeah.
each member can be doing on their own. But like, it might, some people, and I think I'd be included in this, might sort of appreciate to like have a time and just go and like do all that stuff, but like with the
Right.
other members,
Right. Right.
Hmm. And is that right? And is that part of like, could that be a part of the community meeting? Is one of the community
Yeah.
meetings, like once a month, is that?
If it's once a month, it should be the third week of the month or the fourth week of the month. Everybody go do your coordinate
Yeah, I
now.
know. I know. Yeah.
If we continue with coordinate, I don't know, not my department.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I know. My department. I mean, I
your
think
department.
so. I think so. There's a whole new, not not like you know totally different frame,
Mm.
value resource pooling framework that I discovered.
Mm.
That another organization is working on. It's actually it's at its heart, it feels very, 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 very similar, but it just uses a little bit of a different, method. That is something I
Mm.
want to bring in. So, but it's bringing in a little like, yeah, I mean, there's some questions to answer about the value exchange, and resource pooling mechanism, but I'm very excited about it.
Mm.
Yeah. It's called like commitment pooling.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's not like it's not really different than what we're doing, but it's just using, yeah, a different mechanism.
Mm.
Fascinating.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and then the circle meetings. So the last question, I'm looking at the time.
Yeah.
I want to bring that in.
Yeah. Same.
This has been yeah, it's been helpful. I guess there's still that question of, for now, the circle meetings. Do we have like the circle meeting times, like we talked about, and then, we
Right.
show up and, because right now governance circle is sort of on, but like, yeah, it would be good to get, member experience going and yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what Christine and I are emailing about right now. It's like, when do we meet? What do we, how do we get this ball rolling?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
said to her,
yeah,
well, if you come today, maybe we'll just get the ball rolling today during the meeting. Depends who's there and if we split off into do circle work or independent work or whatever.
yeah,
Um, so, I mean, I'm just, me, I'm a vote for how much can we do during a meeting time, and not have, you know, like me going to 3 HSC meetings in a week because I'm part of 2 circles plus the community. That's a lot.
yeah,
Plus I take an onboarding role at some point and I'm doing an intro thing for new people. Like that's a lot.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
totally.
And the immediate need is for a lot of circle activity because we're in the development stage.
Yeah.
We're in a very potent development stage, potentially, with quick growth, potentially, or quick or rapid development, potentially. So in some ways, we have a higher need, I think, currently for circle meetings than we do for, well, onboarding. We're not doing that right now. And, you know, certain kinds of meetings don't have a purpose right now,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Community meeting, like, what's the purpose of a community meeting right now might be very different from the purpose in 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we need circles to actually develop what is the community, what is the governance. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Totally. Yeah, totally.
not much governance to talk about because we don't yet have a governance structure. So for the community to talk about governance doesn't really make sense yet, but the community will need to receive the proposals from the governance and the strategy and the member experience in order to assess, you know, to sign off on it and be like, yep, great, good job, circle. Do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
We agree.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Anything else on meetings?
Just a little note here about, you know, somehow polling for timing, you know, how do we
Hmm.
move towards a time that is functional?
Mm-hmm.
I know that was talked about a couple of weeks ago with some ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that polling for time, like timing, will be easier once we sort of once we say like, oh, okay, like these are the number of meetings that we'll have and the number of each kind, you know,
Okay,
and have a, you know, like a better idea of what we're gonna do, you know, in each meeting.
okay, okay,
And
great.
then, yeah,
Yeah, cool.
yeah, thank you. But I think this was really good. I think this was really good, you know, it was helpful, right? And people can
Yeah,
add, you know, add on to this. But I think, at least to me, you know, it was really helpful to say like, okay, these are the things that we, you know, these are the purposes of the meetings. And then these are like, you know, the sort of the meetings, you know, what we would call them, you know, and what we would do in each of them, you
right.
know, so that way, yeah, yeah, break it down. Yeah, and I think that is, and I'm gonna put that in. Here, I'm gonna put in like next steps. Mm. And then yeah, so I think maybe, you know, take this, workshop it a little bit and make some decisions, you know, on those questions of how many
Yeah,
meetings, what kind, and then poll for
yeah,
timing. Um, yeah, that's great.
cool. Yeah. I'll just add, you know, uh, how many meetings to have and what kind of what purpose. Like, if I can add on to that line right
Yeah.
there, I would add, you
Yes.
know, like set intention for next 2 months and, you know, maybe beyond, but to have some kind of like, oh, for now, what makes sense is this ratio,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it'll change. But for now, the need is for more, I think, more circle time. and the ongoing benefit of like Skillshare space. In a way, like that's what has people feel like there's value now. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I've been hearing, even though it's not every other week, once a week is fine, but some of those other workshopping times or whatever else develops seem to be engaging and really valuable. People are so appreciative
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
What do you want to do about facilitation for the next couple of meetings? I mean, next week is Zoe, but after that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, this is what I have, what I would like to have as like topics, really do have a couple in
Mhm.
mind.
Okay.
Whether they're the next two meetings or not, doesn't matter. But I think that, yeah, I think one topic, is like, what is, start to define like what, like, like how are we building, trust and relationships? What are the expectations around that? What are the expectations around, sort of conflict resolution? What are,
Mm.
like we talked about today. I think that's, because I think that we're actually starting to kind of roll along with governance as far as like,
Okay.
yeah, as far as like governance, decision making, proposals, things like that. But I don't
Okay.
think as a, as a group and as like a topic, we've discussed, um, discussed that. I mean, we've discussed that a lot, in general ways, but sort of discussed more in a way of like, okay, well, how are we defining it? And what does that mean? Like, what is which gets into, which gets into like, what is our like community agreements, right? What are our
Mm.
agreements?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one. Let me see notes. And then the other for me is, value exchange. I've been I haven't really, had a lot of time to do that lately, but I want to try and jump on that because I know that honestly, I think like that is what is the, kind of the driver,
Yeah.
even though might not be the foundation or whatever. That's the driver that, of sort of like, so
Yeah.
I would love to have a meeting where I talk about value, about types of value. That was kind of my plan anyways, of like really going over, these are all the different types of like, resources that we can pool. This is the types of value. Like, let's talk
Yeah.
about that. Let's get more ideas. And then I discovered this, commitment pooling model,
Right.
right? So I really want to like bring that in and introduce that because I think it feels important, to introduce it and get it into the community and sort of see how folks respond to it. Um,
That sounds
I don't
good.
know, you know,
Yeah. Do you want to do some of that on the 16th?
I think the thing is, I think I have to think about like when I could like when I could be, if I could be ready on the 16th to sort of present all of that on value exchange, or if it might be,
Okay.
if it's probably going to be, if I just say it now, more useful for me to sort of say like the 23rd for
Okay.
that, and then maybe talk about like, group agreements,
Okay.
um, in all those ways I was talking about on the 16th.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So that's me, but I also don't want to like, do you have anything? Because I feel like you are, one of the facilitators. So,
Yeah. Um, I would like to not facilitate on the 30th. I hope I can come to the meeting, but I might be already sort of transitioning into dance camp. I'm not going for the whole thing, just
oh, okay.
for the beginning. So I'm looking at like the next 3 weeks and what my participation can be before
Yeah.
the end of the month.
Okay.
So, you know, I could jump in with some of the like culture building kind of stuff. I mean, I could run the 16th, or you and I could sort of brainstorm it together, but
Yeah.
I can certainly imagine some shares and some like collaborative activities that could, you know, similar to the way that the visioning process went. That's the sort of thing that I can sort of it's easy for me to find frameworks and kind of do that to
Yeah.
some extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you want to, I mean, that sounds great. Do you want to like, be the lead facilitator of this on the 16th? But then, like
Sure.
you and I can kind of check in and I can feed you, right? There's some, things,
Yeah,
frameworks, that I can kind of feed and we can talk, we could, always talk about it beforehand,
sure,
but you would be
totally.
like the lead facilitator on it. And then that also,
Yeah, and then you
um,
can jump in and speak to the parts that you want to speak to, of course, you know.
yeah, yeah, but I think that's great. And you're such a great facilitator anyways. So I think it's fab to have you doing that. And then that also, even though we sort of like, can kind of put it together, I think that also gives me then maybe more space to like prepare for the value exchange on the 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just put myself down at this point, for the 30th. If for some reason someone wants to jump in, but I'll just, I put myself in there for 30th.
Okay.
Okay. Um, great. So then the last question would be, so that covers us for facilitators. Now I'm just looking at emails.
Yep.
Um, so let's see. All right, so you're sending. So basically, like what I'm gonna do, I got in touch with Zoe. Why don't I touch base with Zoe and say like, hey, like give us a write-up, for the Skillshare.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if we need to, I don't know, fill something in, we can. I don't know, if it's necessary.
Yeah. Uh, there's always like the random topic. There's the wrap up of this meeting, like reporting out.
Oh
That's always
yeah,
like, can be an element.
yeah,
Um, or it can be that like some out of the blue inspiration topic that
yeah.
came
Those
everywhere,
happen.
like food for thought. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. So I'll write, but I'll definitely write on the 20. I'll put myself in for writing content on the 22nd, since the
Okay.
23rd is value exchange. And then the question, which we don't have to answer now, is who of us, wants to write for the 15th, which,
Oh, yeah, I'll do it. As if I'm facilitating, I can drop seeds in there for like what that time is going to be, and that's cool. I can do that.
awesome. You're there.
Okay.
Okay. So, and then for the 8th, I'll just put, Zoe and dot, dot, dot,
Right.
if needed. Why didn't that turn green? Huh. Hmm. My,
The 5th. Let me see if I can actually format and send on the 5th, because let's see, when am I getting home from dance camp?
oh, on August 5th. Yeah.
On August 5th. No, I can do it. I can do
Okay.
it.
And
That's
yeah,
fine.
no need to stress yourself if you can't.
Yeah, no, I'm
Okay.
mostly a lot home this summer, which I'm appreciating.
Yeah,
Just a little bit of here and there, not too much.
that's cool.
Um, yeah, cool.
It's also cool you're going to dance camp.
Yeah,
It's cool you
to be
like it.
honest, I'm doing it for my kids this year.
Huh.
Um,
Wow.
I'm kind of into being home. I'm kind of into having like the meaningful friendships and not like I'm not as attracted to the like 500 people festival atmosphere, that kind of network. I'm more interested in the sort of smaller networks right now of
Yeah.
friends and family, but it's fine. Maybe by then I'll be like, yeah,
Yeah.
woohoo.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Dance it up
cool.
in community. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And if you're right, I mean, I get why you would be going, for taking kids there, and it's a cool
Oh, it's heaven for them. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. Well, it might take some of that, like if there's any, if you ever have, like this internal pressure, to be like, oh, okay, here I'm at dance camp and I have to have like this great time or something, it's just can take that away
Totally. Yeah, I can stay in my tent by myself and watch the trees move. I
the
don't
whole
have to be like
time.
in the community the whole time, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You don't have to be in the beehive. Can feel like bzzz.
Yeah, yeah. No, you can stay in your tent the whole time, meditating and possibly achieve transcendence of your human form.
Totally. And then I can write about that in the Monday email.
Yeah, see, that's perfect. That's what I love about it. You'd receive it, you'd achieve a transcendence, but still come back
Yeah.
and fulfill your, agreements.
Totally. Totally. Have I ever told you this that I have a few friends who think about the reincarnation wheel, and they say like that they believe in it, but they've had enough. They've had enough suffering and enough human, and they want to transcend that this is their last lifetime, their last,
Yeah,
and they just want to go be done. They want to be in nirvana for the rest of whatever their conscious existence, you know?
yeah,
And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, it never even occurred to me before they said it. I'm like, I like this human thing. It's a pain in the ass, but it's interesting, you know? And to just transcend and be in bliss all the time, I'm like, that sounds boring.
yeah, yeah.
So it's different, the different flavors that appeal to different
Yeah,
people.
yeah, 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 no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, that's good because usually, like, right, like that's this whole thing of, like, Buddhism, is like, right, to like it is really to like, like especially the initial, sort of like the original teachings of the Buddha, is, there's sort of a goal, to like, be, be enlightened, right? And get off of the wheel of karma.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, if I reach enlightenment, I want to come back and help some other people.
Yeah.
Like that's my initiative. My initiative is like take what gold I harvest about being human and then put it to use, you know. Um, which means being human again and going through the muck and the sense of separation and the sense of unity and the sense of and just like do it all over again. This like
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
reality.
That's awesome. You're basically, so you are saying you'd like to be a bodhisattva.
I'm
Uh,
willing. I'm willing.
that's really, no, but it's interesting that you're sort of saying that. And I'm not sure if you have like studied the framework, but it's very cool because as Buddhism went along, so there, Theravada was like original Buddhist, teachings, and then as it went along, the Mahayana Buddhist tradition came into being, and basically the Mahayanas were like, if I'm sort of saying it correctly, the Mahayanas were like, oh well, wait, like, you know, what about everybody else? Like we go and get enlightened, then what about everybody else? And so they're saying, oh, actually, okay, the idea, like they sort of revised the goal a little bit to
Hmm.
say, no, actually the goal is like to become a bodhisattva. And if bodhisattva is like kind of like an enlightened being, but that comes back into human form. And basically we'll keep doing that until all humans, like all humans are free,
Hmm.
So like until the last one, is
Hmm.
sort of is been freed of suffering, then the
Hmm.
bodhisattvas keep coming back.
Mhm.
which I
Yeah.
think you're like, so that's very cool that you said that.
I don't know. That's where I arrived. In my 41 years, we'll see. We'll see what's
Yeah,
next.
yeah. We'll see what's next, but that's there you go. There you go. No, I can dig it, you know. That's like we don't want to leave anyone behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I can dig what you're saying. I'm like I'm ready to get off of the wheel, you know. I'm like I'm I'm done, but you never
Yeah.
know, right? After several whatever million eons of total bliss, I'd probably become pretty bored.
Yeah. Well, there's this whole school of thought that, the only reason we embody at all is because we're all God looking at himself. So,
Yeah.
like, do we all want to transcend actually? Like, maybe we don't. Maybe the point is to have this experience of seeing our great diversity and great beauty and great variety and being able to see from all these different perspectives, like, oh, I don't know what it's like to live in a man's body, but I could maybe learn about that if I'm willing, if I pay attention to how you live your life, or this or that, or you have an experience of parenting and I don't, or you have an experience of great suffering and I don't, but I'm going to grow my compassion for that, or grow my ability to cross the bridge to what's different, right? If we're all just in the one consciousness all the time, there's no bridges to cross. It's
Yeah.
all one consciousness all the time.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go. There's no journey to take at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what if the journey is interesting,
It is. Well, yeah, I mean, this being in this human form is, if nothing else, interesting.
Right.
It's very interesting. Yeah. And there's a lot more things. Yeah, I know there's this Alan Watts, who's this like a Buddhist teacher in the 60s. And I remember he talks about this, sort of it's like a way of picturing like how like our cosmic consciousness works, and just in the way that you're talking about. And I like, it sort of says it as like a story, but in a way that kind of makes sense for to conceive, which is like, yeah, like we're God, right? Like I'm God, but so are you, and so's that plant, and so right, so we're all God, and so like how what happens is that like like God is all one, right? So it's just like and so we're hanging around doing that bliss thing, being God, God, and that without like this pain and suffering of a form. And you do that, like I think that was where my joke came from. You do that for like several hundred eons or something, and like you get bored.
Right.
And it's like, okay, here's another day, so it's, and then you say, okay, well then the way he talks about it, he's like, all right, well, let's do this thing where we're gonna like play a game that we're not God.
That's right.
And
We're gonna like play hide and seek from ourselves,
yeah, yeah,
pretty much. And everybody goes hide a different corner of the universe and then try to find each other.
yeah,
Take that trip.
yeah, exactly. So he's like, oh, we're gonna play a game, and then we're, oh, and then we come back and ooh, that was scary, right? And you keep doing that until you like really, you sort of forget, but you're
Mm,
like, but the souls don't forget, and we're embodying, then it's like, why are we embodying this form? Why am I embodying that form and all that? But that's kind of like this basic idea, right? And so then that's our spiritual work.
right.
In a nutshell, is to just remember that we're God.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. All right. So how's that for an ending of
It's
this
all on
week's
the recording, apparently.
Holistic Systems Cooperative? Yeah, this is the stuff, where it's like, yeah, I just keep recording, it's, and then, I'm like, okay, if anybody's still watching here, then, thank you for watching. And this was Rob and Saya's kind of random conversation.
Totally random.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Totally
right, let's sign
awesome. But awesome.
up. I think we got great plans for the rest of the month. So
Yeah.
hey, if you're still watching, come to the rest of the meetings in July. They're going to be great.
Yeah, they're going to be great. We're going to be doing specific things. And then if you want to stay a half hour later, you can be, you know, talking about random stuff and God and ascension and all that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Saya. And thanks for, thanks for the,
you.
for helping me with the, planning and keeping everything on track and, much appreciated.
Yeah,
Always.
likewise. Rocking it. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a great birthday. And now back at it, back to work.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.